So Jen sent me a video today. Jen and I pretty much text every single day. And she sent me a video and she said, do you want to see the most New Yorker thing ever? Because she knows I love the accent. I love her whole world that she lives in. Mm-hmm. And she sends me this video of this school official in her district. I'm not going to
That's pretty much giving it away.
I'm not going to say who it is.
All the school officials send out videos? No.
I'm not going to say where she lives, but it was this male school official. And she wanted me to check out his voice to hear what he was talking about.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. He was the most attractive school official I have ever seen. And apparently Jen had never noticed this, but it was also the first time you had really seen him on camera too, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I've seen him once or twice, but never really paid attention, I guess.
And you sent it to me for the accent, and I did not pay attention to the video because all I could focus on was the fact that in New York, they have school officials that look like this. And here in Minnesota, I can promise you that
not so much.
I'm sure it's the case, but just not anywhere that I've personally been at.
Well, I'm glad I can bring some enjoyment to your day.
Oh my gosh, I'm not over it. So she just sent me a story time that he did. So I mean, I'd like to say that I'm showing the kids, but this is really for me,
right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You don't know what you have, Jen.
I think that was the text you sent. You don't know what you have.
I think I did. By the way, if my husband's listening, you are still the number one man in my life, but I was needing a new celebrity crush. And I think I just found one.
He might be on her list now, so get ready.
Yeah. He just apparently is a, New York school teacher.
I love it.
Apparently, my standards are low when it comes to celebrity crushes.
Are they?
Is a school teacher, which is enough.
With a New York accent.
Yes, with a New York accent, which is enough because school teachers work very hard for not enough pay. And now they're putting their actual lives on the line.
That's right.
So we need to give them hazard pay if they're going back to school.
Correct.
All right, I'll get off my soapbox.
Hashtag hazard pay for teachers.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to take a deep breath.
Yeah, you gotta shake some of that.
I gotta wipe off my sweat. Welcome to the Magical Mommy Mondays podcast. I'm Angela Dahlgren here with my co-host Jen Snyder.
Hello.
Last episode, we talked with Cindy about her life as a YouTube creator and love of Disney. That was a great episode.
So fun. Oh my goodness, I love her.
I was telling Cindy that she sparked my Disney joy for the first time in months. I've kind of been in a lull since the park closed. I don't know, maybe some Disney hopelessness for a little bit, but she picked that up. That was great.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So fun. I can't wait for our dinner at Ohana.
Oh, I know. I can't wait to try the food. The lo mein or the noodles there always looked really good to me, so I have to try that. But I know that the meats are really good as well.
Yes.
We would love any feedback on our social media for any episode that you listen to. We always list those social media handles in the show notes as well as our email. While this show is a passion project for us, we do want to create something that you will love as well. So if you have any constructive criticism, you can be honest, but be nicely honest. Leave that for us.
Yes.
Somewhere.
We're open to it.
Today, we are talking about working from home. This is something that I have a lot of experience in. I've done it for probably about 6 years at this point. So I thought that we would kind of discuss, since that's something that a lot of us have been doing the past few months and will probably do into the future. So let's talk working from home, specifically with kids.
Yeah, let's do it. I feel like we need intro music for this.
Let's do it.
And now here's a segment on working from home.
Do. Work from home. I don't know who put a nickel in us.
I'm going to keep all of that. I'm keeping it all in as I edit.
I should have done a little bit of a drum riff. Should have got my sticks out.
You should do it.
They're downstairs. I'll use
next time.
So I'll just kind of go through, I guess, my resume?
Sure. Yeah. If you
so to
could,
speak.
yeah, perhaps you can post that for everybody, your resume.
Yeah, my LinkedIn.
Yeah, exactly.
Jen, if you just kind of want to leave this like an interview, maybe we'll just kind of go that route.
That would be great. So could you tell me first a little bit about what you did prior to having children?
Well, I had a lot more free time. I took a lot better care of myself. Yeah, and I feel like I saw my friends a lot more.
Right. Specifically with jobs.
Oh, okay.
Right.
See.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at behavioral interviews, I should point out. Whenever they're like, what is your greatest weakness? And you're supposed to say like, I can't leave a project unfinished.
Right.
I can't lie.
Yeah.
I have to like be genuine. I can't say stuff like that because great thing I'm a medical actor. I can't lie. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Moving on. Okay. So I have a degree in communications and healthcare communications. But when I had an internship at a big hospital in Minnesota, but when I graduated, they had a hiring freeze. So I graduated at a really banner time for a lot of people that year. It was very hard to find a job. But it kind of worked out in the end because we had to move anyway for my husband's job. So, yeah. So what I did is I worked with kids, which was awesome. I loved being a preschool teacher. It was so much fun. I honestly think about going back a lot. So I taught preschool pretty much full time. However, with the job that I was currently doing, which was more in the Twin Cities area, I had a commute. And I found out I was pregnant while I was working at that job. And so I just wanted to find a job closer to home.
And you were teaching when you found out you were pregnant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I was a preschool teacher. And so I did find a job closer to home, still doing preschool. And I worked through my pregnancy, had my baby, which is my older daughter, and then went back to work with her, working part-time. Now, why did I go part-time? My husband's job, he's a government employee, and with his job, he does a lot of shift work. So one day he might go in from 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. The next day he might go in from 4 p.m. to midnight. And with a kind of inconsistent schedule like that, we decided we wanted a consistent parent around for the kids. So we kind of made that decision that while they were little, I would work part-time. So once my daughter was 3 months old, that's what happened is I worked mornings 5 days a week at the preschool, and they had a daycare there. So I brought her with me several days a week.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that worked out really well. I would work till noon, bring her back. Some days I would leave her with my husband because he might not go until the afternoon, and then they would have some time together to bond. So that was for about 3 months. When she was 6 months old, I had a grand mal seizure in my sleep.
Yeah.
And because of that, I couldn't drive for 3 months. That's kind of the rule when you have seizures like that.
Yeah.
Maybe in general, at least in my case. So I ended up having to quit my job because I couldn't drive myself to work. And then I just stayed home with her. The blessing there was that when she was 6 months, the month I had my seizure, I'd gotten a job with touring plans. So I was writing. It was perfect timing. So instead of going crazy, being like, oh my gosh, I'm just there, I can't even drive anywhere with her. We can only go to one park. We can only go to, I should point out, that's when my addiction to Starbucks started because there was a Starbucks that we could walk to. And I never drank coffee before that. But we could walk there. So I'm like, well,
better late than never.
I know. That's funny now that I think about that. That was my first latte I'd ever had. But instead of freaking out that I couldn't go anywhere, I had a weekly article for touring plans where I could talk about Disney and kind of go to a happy place once a week. And that was really great. So 3 months went by. And when she was 9 months, she started daycare part-time at a daycare center. And that was part-time usually means at a daycare center about 6 hours, which I think is that's really nice considering you're only paying for part-time, but you get 6 hours there.
Right. Yeah.
And she was doing that 2 times a week. The reason was because I started a job as a kids wellness coach. And you're probably like, what does a kids wellness coach do? I would go to different preschools and daycares and sometimes schools, and I would do like kind of like obstacle courses, almost. I don't call them fitness classes, but we do obstacle courses and kind of do songs and move our bodies and learn about a lesson about taking care of our bodies, whether it be brushing our teeth or learning about a food plate and what proteins were and carbohydrates were, and just things like that. There would be different lessons all about wellness. And then I started their yoga program there, their kids yoga program.
Oh, that's awesome. I did not know that. Perfect.
Yeah,
learn something new every day.
I know, a little fun fact about me. And so she went to daycare twice a week, and then my husband kind of supplemented any other days that I worked. And this it's getting a long time for me to actually talk about working from home.
You're fine.
But I was continuing to do touring plans. Okay. And during that time, my responsibilities for touring plans were growing. So I was kind of balancing the two jobs, the two part-time jobs. And also around that time, I got pregnant again. So that was 9 months to probably Annie was about 17 months by the time I got pregnant. Jen, do you have any questions? Am I confusing you? Do you have any clarifying you need done?
How did you get into the wellness coach job? How did that happen?
I think maybe where I was doing preschool, I think that wellness place they came to the preschool to do classes. And then someone mentioned that they had job openings.
That's cool. Oh, that was my only question. You can continue.
Okay, great. So then at 6 months pregnant, I had another seizure. So then I had to quit that job because I couldn't drive again. Yeah. I mean, they offered to save my job for me, which was incredibly generous, but I just didn't feel that it was fair for them to have a job for me and take on extra load and extra classes just, for me to turn around and go on maternity leave for 3 more months.
Yeah.
So I quit that job and then spent my last 3 months pregnant with Annie, with my daughter. Still doing touring plans and trying to film videos in advance, trying. Yeah. And as far as my seizures, they seemed to be more hormonal based because I had a really difficult pregnancy with Annie. I had, labor, I had HELLP syndrome. And I was very heavily breastfeeding postpartum with her. And then when I was 6 months pregnant, I was obviously pregnant. So hormones were kind of wild in case people had questions about why I was having seizures.
Right.
So I spent those 3 months just kind of doing touring plans and watching Annie. And then I had Jay, my second child, and went on maternity leave. So before I get into, me coming back from my second maternity leave and really working more full-time from home, Jen, I want to hear your experience, before kids and then, what your decision to ultimately stay home, because I know that's a hard one.
Yeah. So my first job ever was in so
I worked at a Dairy Queen.
So before kids, post-college, before kids, I have a similar degree in public relations. But I worked for a marketing company, which is what I technically worked for in Disney. For those of you who don't know, I was an operating participant in Disney. So I technically worked for a marketing company. Their client was IBM. IBM had an exhibit in Epcot. So I was kind of working for like 3 companies at once. So I worked for that marketing company I was about 2 years in Disney. And then when I moved back to New York, they were opening a Palm retail store in Rockefeller Center, you know, like the Palm Pilots,
Yeah.
like that, the Trio phones, all the rage. So I went to the Palm retail store as one of the managers, stayed for about a year and a half, which was kind of cool because I was working in Rockefeller Center every day.
And the Palm retail store, I'm sorry to interrupt.
You're fine.
Like the Palm Pilots?
Yeah, like they sold Palm Pilots, Trio phones, which were like the opposite of Blackberries at that point. But it was like not as cool as a Blackberry, but I can say it's not as cool. And then like iPhones were kind of just starting. So it was like no one was caring that much about Trios except me. So yeah.
So you stayed there a year and a half.
Yeah. And it was kind of cool just being in that building every day though, and like commuting to the city and like, you know, trying to pretend like I was on SNL, but I wasn't.
You're like living the dream.
Right? But yeah, so I left there after a year and a half, went to work for an airline, and I was there for 6.5 years. And I started there doing internal communications for the airports department. And then I kind of moved more into airport, but all in the corporate office, more into airports doing like policy writing and helping with the training and all that kind of like writing the training and all that kind of stuff. But I got pregnant with my son while I was there. My commute to this office could be anywhere from 2 to 4 hours a day round trip.
I was going to ask you, how long was your commute and what time did you have to wake up?
So early, just so early. Because at a point, I could take the train there. You would take, you know, a train to the subway and whatever. And that's over an hour or so each way. But then I would start driving because when I was getting sick in the first trimester, I'm like, oh, no. I'm not going to be on the train to get sick. I'd rather have control and like, or if like I didn't feel well, I wanted like people to leave work easy. I didn't want to have to deal with the train. So I started driving more, but driving and sitting in traffic, those days sometimes would be like 2 hours each way.
How do you park in New York?
So for where I was, there was a parking garage that we used that I had to pay for the parking garage, but I mean, there was a parking garage.
Is it scary to drive in New York?
I think for a lot of outside New York people, yes. And there are people
You said that really nicely.
Thank you. I think there are people, even on Long Island, where I am, that don't venture into the city much, that are like, oh, I don't drive in the city. No way, I'm not doing that. And they take the train in and, you know, whatever. But I have driven in the city plenty. The office I was in is in Queens, so not officially Manhattan, but it's crazy enough. And the commute was miserable. And plenty of times while pregnant, I would just be crying in my car because I found you go through a lot of emotions when you're sitting in that kind of traffic. Like you're like frustrated that there's so much traffic. Then you cry because you just don't want to be there anymore. And then you're like, well, I'm over it. Well, and then you start singing. Yes, you go through so many stages sitting there. There was one day that it rained. It was like drizzling. This is such a tangent. This has nothing to do with John. It was like drizzling. It was barely rain. It took me 4 hours to get home.
What if you have to pee?
Right? I guess I just never encountered that. Sometimes my parents, technically, I probably did, because I know one time I did get sick in my car driving to work. And I stopped at my parents' house because they're kind of on the way. And I stopped at my parents' house to like refresh myself.
Oh my gosh. Do your parents live in New York City or in Long Island?
They're on Long Island, but they're closer to the city. They're like on the border of Queens and Long Island.
So did you grow up in Long Island?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Long Island.
Long Island. I grew up in Long Island, but we were very close to Queens. They're like a 20-minute train ride into the city.
Oh, that's really close.
So, yeah. Whereas where I am now, I'm an hour train ride into the city. So that's not as fun. Wow. But yeah. So
I have so many questions now about New York.
No, go ahead. I mean, let's tangent. Go ahead. What else you got?
Let's just cancel this episode and start a Ask Jen About New York episode.
Yeah, totally.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So that, but probably after like 2 years of being at the airline is when I started to want to leave the airline. And then I stayed 4.5 more years. So add now I'm pregnant. I don't want to do this commute anymore. I'm so upset. But also knowing there's no way we can afford a child and one salary and have me stay home. I will preface, I have always been the person that wants to be a mom. I would love to be a stay-at-home mom. That was like that's where I want to be. But also having reality of like
just financially.
How am I supposed to, So then, after he was born, I'm on maternity leave and we're like really playing it out. Like, okay, I'm gone 12 hours a day, basically. My husband worked from home, which was good, but obviously he's on calls most of the day. So he doesn't have like a flexible work from home job. Like he's like working consistently in the business hours, all that kind of stuff. So to factor in like daycare costs, to factor in my commuting costs, and it's like, so what am I leaving for 12 hours a day for? Is this really worth it? And now looking back, sure, a little money would have been worth it because we have nothing now. But but it was like, no, this isn't really worth it. And maybe I can find something around here, or maybe I can get something part-time, or we can work something out. But I think I'm done with that chapter, which is what I did. But when you had Annie in daycare for the 2 days a week, did you then increase it at some point, or was she always kind of 2 days?
So we always kept her around 2 days. And so my husband's job, we have the luxury of him going in afternoon sometimes, and his schedule changes a couple times a year. So sometimes he might work more mornings half the week. Sometimes he might work more nights half the week. Okay. So we are lucky in that we can keep our daycare costs a little lower, because if I need to work, he can watch them for the morning.
Yeah.
But then, the drawback with that is that on the days that he works nights, he's not there for dinner. He's not there for bedtime. If they have activities down the line, he's not going to be there for games. But, you take the good with the bad, and we knew what it was going to be going into it. And everyone has those kind of things to think about.
Yeah.
And kind of in your situation too, Jen, me not working full time was going to be less money, but then there's a consistent parent there, someone who can be there if the kids are sick, be there, if there's a Halloween party or whatever, so we made the sacrifice that there would be less money, but, then there would be a parent there.
Yeah. Did you end up going full time with touring plans at some point?
Had my seizure, quit that job, had a baby, maternity leave, all that stuff. So by the time I came back, touring plans was something I could really do as definitely more than part-time. I'd say at one point it was, 35 plus hours a week. What I really was grateful for is it was super flexible. I could do it from home. They were great about the fact that if I had, sick kids, and my kids were just baby and toddler, and just family life in general, things could be moved around, or, if I was sick and I couldn't get a video edited that week, that's fine. Put it out the next week. Not a big deal. So it was really great in that respect. And so how it kind of worked for me, the whole work from home thing, is that my kids would go to daycare about 2 times a week, sometimes 3, depending on just how busy things were. At some point, my daughter started preschool, so then she was doing that a couple mornings a week as well. So that added more time where I could work while my son napped. My husband was also there when I needed him. But honestly, there were just a lot of late nights editing and doing things like that, editing videos. Mostly I filmed during daycare days, and all of that big stuff was done when I knew I had a whole chunk of like 6 hours to do things. So I got a lot of stuff done then. I worked during rest time. There was a period when they stopped napping. So, and this was up until like this past January, mind you. So it's been like 4 years since this point, but this is kind of how I managed during those 4 years. So yeah, during rest time or nap time, I worked, if they didn't want to sleep, they could have quiet time where they read or watched a movie, and I would work then. I would schedule a lot of things in advance. Like if I knew I was going to record the podcast, do Facebook Lives or Instagram Lives or anything like that, I would just tell my husband, I'd be like, hey, this is that day. I need you to watch the kids, or I'd plan it around days that they were in daycare. It's just a lot. It's kind of a lot of being organized, but it's a lot of just, I did media content. Yeah. I was a content creator. So I just worked in little pockets all day, every day, which I know, Jen, with you and Frank running the Dillows accounts and Magical Mommy Mondays, you just kind of fit in social media whenever you can throughout the day.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's how we roll.
So I'd plan it, but then I do it in organized kind of pockets. Like I'm like, okay, this has to go out in the morning, this has to go out in the midday, and then evening.
Yeah.
So it's nice that I could do a lot of it from my phone. And then when I had work trips, I would just work that out in advance with grandparents so they could help when my husband worked and things like that.
Yeah. You make it work. You make it happen.
Yeah.
I have not been back to work full time in 6 years. It's kind of crazy that soon I will be out of working full time as long as I was at my last job. Like I was there 6.5 years, and now I haven't been in like 6 years. It's like so weird. But I've done like a lot of like side gigs in the 6 years, basically.
I know about one or two of them, but what were some other ones?
So, I mean, the first one I did, I'm not completely proud of, but I got in to one of the MLM businesses.
I knew you were going to say that.
One of the multi-level marketing businesses. Here's what I will say. I'm not going to bash it. I know people that have and are still doing it that are insanely successful with it. Like I actually know it's not like so-and-so's friend's cousin. Like, no, I know these people and I see it and it's working for them. Awesome. It's not something that worked for me. But I liked the products that I was selling. I was doing skincare, and I would still use those products. They weren't so pricey. But I didn't love like how you have to go about it. I was absolutely the person reaching out randomly to people like, I don't want to do that.
I saw you liked my status.
Yeah, I don't want to do that, but I did it. And I like for probably 1.5 years was like, okay, I'm going in. And I did that. I would find like vendor shows and like set up a booth and like try to do that. I was
Jen, you committed.
I committed. I was like, all right, let's try to make this work because this is something I can do around at that point was just my son. So like, let me see if I can do this. No, I didn't really, it was fine. And it like brought in like a tiny like droplet of money every month. But
do you mind sharing how much do you think you made every month?
Oh, no, not like droplets.
Like $10 or like 50?
Oh, no. Like, yeah, like maybe 100 or 2.
That's not nothing. That's not a droplet. That's like groceries.
Yes. But here's the thing. Over time, those people that may have been like, oh, I'll buy the products or whatever, over time are like, these are really expensive. And they start dropping off.
Yeah.
So that's part of the problem. And yes, they are very expensive. And one of the biggest thing is to try to like grow a team because then you make money off of them and you make money off of the people they bring on and all of that. So I do feel like you also have to have kind of like this good network of people that would all be willing to like go in, because if not, then you're just trying to sell just the products and you don't make the money that way. You make the money from the whole multi-level idea of everyone's making money. So you're making money. And I think I had like one person and I don't think she ever did anything. So like at some point I just sort of like, I phased it out. I was like, I'm not going to really put anything towards this. People were still kind of in their like that they were in. And I'm like, I'll just take that and that's fine and whatever. So I did that. I have also I did one of the companies that you teach English for children in China, but all virtually, like in a virtual classroom.
How was that?
That was really fun. And I did it for like over a year and a half, maybe.
Where did you hear about that?
I think I just like probably looking for jobs on Indeed or something, and it popped up.
Wow.
And I think it was after the 3-year-old was born. Maybe I started right after or something, but I did it for like over a year, and I liked it. I think, over time, because you're working on 12-hour difference. So I would work really early mornings, or you work at night, and sometimes doing that over and over. And because she was so little, then once she like got a little bigger and would get up a lot during the night or whatever it was like, okay, this is really not working out. And that's something else that I would make like $200 or something like a month from.
That's a really great idea.
Yeah. And you can do more hours with it. And then it was just like, okay, how much can I function with an infant and a 2-year-old and teach kids? And because when you're doing it, you're like on, you're on camera and you're like, hey, okay. And like try to get them to say things. And some kids were like just not having it. And you're like, okay, let's move on to the next part. Yeah.
I'm doing this today.
So it was also that of like, okay, I can do this, but I have to be on at like 5 a.m. or I have to be or on at 10 p.m. when I'm like over it for the day, stuff like that. I also, last summer, I had started working with the same agency that my son went through for speech therapy and his evaluations and part of early intervention and all of that. And I was really excited about that because I was like, I can do this job. And you're kind of like the liaison between like the parents and the providers and all this. And I'm like, I've been there. I can, relate, all that kind of stuff. My issue, this really sounds like I just like take jobs and leave them. But my issue there after the summer was like, it wasn't as flexible as I thought it would be. So the day-to-day became like way more juggling than I had thought. For me, it's always been like, because all these jobs are like, I'm trying to work around what I have going on during the day. So I'm fine with like not making actually, a full-time salary or anything, because I'm just doing this on the side. But once it starts interfering with the day-to-day, and the payout isn't enough for me to like change my life, or like, do we do daycare? Do we get my mom to come over more? Where if it's like, yeah, but is it really worth it? When you balance everything out, typically no. There's a part of me that's like, when I was working full time, I stayed for a long time at each job, but now it's like,
you're talking about 3 jobs over 6 years.
That's a good point. I never really looked at it that way.
Yeah. It's okay. You don't have to explain yourself to us. It's over 6 years, and you have to have a job that's going to work well for your family. And I feel like part of doing, a work from home job, and obviously we're not talking about like full-time jobs that you were doing somewhere else and now it's here because we're doing it during a pandemic.
Yeah.
I feel like in my own personal experience, there's a level like where you have to be really organized.
Yeah.
Because at one point, I was doing touring plans, my medical acting thing that I do, which is my only job now. And then I sing for weddings. I sing for wedding ceremonies. And when you're balancing all these things, can you tell that I just need to have a million things to do at once? It's a creative person right there. When you have all these things that you're trying to balance, whether it's, one side gig or one full-time work from home gig or 3, you just have to be really organized, especially if your kids are at home.
Yeah.
Because you have to make sure, like, okay, are they kept busy? Do they have a snack? Like, as it is, my husband's working and my kids are all set up in my room on their iPads.
No judgment.
I mean, you have to make sure that they're covered and there's someone
Yes.
watching them. So there's just a huge level of organization that needs to be done, but it can be done. I mean, as far as pros and cons, I'd say that there's both for sure. I mean, pros, flexibility. It's amazing. I'm home if the kids need me. There's no commute. I'm currently in exercise clothes right now and no makeup. I can get little home chores done throughout the day, like putting a load of laundry in or I don't know. I don't really like to vacuum, but I guess I could vacuum.
I mean, if you had to, you could.
I mean, the option is
if there were crumbs on the floor, you could technically vacuum them up.
I could. Yeah. And I can set my own schedule, and that's really great. The cons is that there are always little chores staring at you in the face. Like, hey, you need to do the pile of laundry that's sitting there. There's a pile of dishes right there that you should be doing instead of working. So I found that I worked at coffee shops a lot at one point because I just had to get out of the house. Kind of combat that. So if you do see things like that happening, there are little ways to combat that. Or I would just work in the office all day, which I'm sure your husband does. He's just like in one room.
Oh, yeah. No, there are times I kind of come in here and I'm like, how about you just stand up? Just stand up and like come out of this room for a minute.
Stretch some limbs.
Get some air. Yeah.
I'd say a big con for me, I'd say there were two. There was no one to talk to or socialize with in person. Yeah. All of my friends work-wise were virtual. Yeah. Even now doing this, like in this podcast with you, we met kind of because of my last job being in the Disney community. All of my Disney friends are virtual. So it's not like I can go out for a cup of coffee with any of you. And that's really sad.
That's true.
And then the second one that is kind of big to me is there's a lot of guilt for me working from home because I could do a lot of it like at a table or on the couch if I wanted. But then the kids are there and I'd feel guilty because they'd want to play, but I needed to work and I loved my job and I loved what I did. But knowing that they were there was hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the guilt is real. And I think, we also put pressure on ourselves because I think we do a lot as moms but because we do a lot, then when we're not doing as much, we feel guilty about it. I mean, even, there are days I always tell my husband that, I feel like the kids see me juggle all day, every day, because whether it's doing like social media stuff for the podcast or, the one other job I had, and it was recently and it didn't last long because it was like a 3-month contract. So I was like, I'm not going to continue after the 3-month contract, or 6 months, whatever it was. But it was an app kind of like TikTok, but it's also like an ESL type of thing. So you make these little videos as a way for people to be able to like learn English kind of quick.
You'd be so good at that.
Thanks. But they also then started wanting like more and more and more. And I was like, well, not anymore. But so whether it was like doing the social media for that and doing the videos and all, it's like constant juggle and trying to divide your time. And especially then in pandemic worlds where then it's like homeschool, divide your time plus this and this and this. And I'm not whining by any means. People are doing this crazy homeschool stuff with the pandemic going on, and you have, a full-time job that you're trying to work out. So everyone's juggling, everyone's doing it. And I think, at the end of the day, as parents, you can't win because if you work, you're judged. Oh, you work? Oh, you have your kids in daycare?
You stay home?
You don't, right. You don't spend any time with them? Oh, you don't work? So what do you do all day? So what is your, like, don't you get bored? Don't you get like, what are you doing? Any which way, you're getting judged for it. And
you're judging yourself twice as hard. Yes. I'm sitting at my computer while my kids are watching a movie. They're not talking to me anyway. And I'm thinking, all they see me doing is being on my phone and sitting at my computer. And they're just going to know me as mommy always being on her phone, ignoring them. Yes. And it's like, if you don't worry that other people are judging you, you're judging yourself just as harshly. And at the end of the day, it's all BS.
Yeah.